Hello everyone, and welcome to this UFI Connect session. I'm Christian Druart, UFI Research Manager and also Secretary of the UFI Working Group on Sustainable Development. A very special welcome to all those familiar names I have seen on the list. Diane from Shenyang, Hélène in Sydney, Sandy in Hong Kong, Vicky and Ravinder from India, Pravit and Talun from Thailand, just to name a few. Based on yesterday's registration list, we have more than 120 registrations coming from 29 countries. First, a quick introduction on UFI Connects. There are a series of online events that we launch considering that with the pandemic keeping most exhibition industry professionals apart, our need to talk, to discuss, and to learn is bigger than ever. So UFI Connect is a program of educational talks, panels, and sessions. You can see upcoming as well as previous sessions at www.ufi.org/UFIConnects. And today's session around waste management is also driven by the idea that those companies who can should try to work on improving this aspect. Second, some quick housekeeping notes. My colleague Karen has put you all on mute while our speakers are talking. We have scheduled time for a discussion today as well, and please use the chat function to ask your question. My colleague Gosha will help me pick them up, and I will call you up when we get there. Karen will then activate your microphone and you will be seen on screen if you have your camera on. Let's move to slide 2, Pascal, please. So today's session is about waste management in the exhibition industry. Several UFI members asked us to work on this issue, and we set up several regional groups around the world with the support of Greenview and Impact Zero, both members of the UFI Working Group on Sustainable Development. In parallel, we selected waste management as the 2020 annual award competition. UFI and Greenview consolidated their findings in a report that was released a week ago, and this session is to present and discuss those findings. So Olivia from Greenview is the first speaker today. Greenview is a sustainability consulting and research firm based in Singapore and member of the UFI Sustainable Development Working Group. Olivia, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Right, just bear with me while I get the deck up.
Can you turn that light back on?
Excellent. Can everybody hear me, Christian?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Christian. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Greenview is indeed based in Singapore, but I am in London, so not so far away from Christian and the team in Paris. It's a pleasure to have been involved in this initiative, and I will dive right in with a quick quiz through the report that we have pulled together with the help of Impact Zero and UFI. Now, for some reason, I can't move on my slides. Oh, there we go. Right, so first of all, just an introduction to waste as an issue. So waste generation and waste diversion are global issues. According to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, if we don't take significant action, there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean by 2050. According to another data point from the UN, 1/3 of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally, which amounts to about 1.3 billion tonnes per year. Waste is a big issue in our society and is identified in the Sustainable Development Goals under Goal 12, which gives us a useful framework for how we can address it. And waste is a big issue in the exhibition industry as well. Multiple events, fast turnaround, international nature. It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge for us. And according to one data point I found, the exhibition industry generates over 600,000 tonnes of garbage every year. So it's a challenge, but progress is possible through goals and waste management policies and some of the best practices that we will talk about in this presentation. Now, Christian's already mentioned all the good work that UFI has been doing, so I'm not going to repeat this. But as he mentioned, the Sustainable Development Award 2020 focused on waste management, and it's great that we've got some of those best practices with us today, and we'll be talking later to those individuals, so we can actually hear firsthand how some of these challenges are addressed. The first part of the report looks at the regulatory landscape. What we found was there's no one-size-fits-all approach to regulation, but there were some broad conclusions that emerged from the discussions. And the first is that the regulatory environment varies hugely depending on the region, country, or even the city where a venue is located. As Ufi mentioned, as Christian mentioned, there was sort of a regional approach we took to this, and it seems that regulations in Asia appear to be less onerous than those in Europe or the Americas, but there may still be a mix of national and local level regulations to be followed. There are penalties, they do exist, attached to national or state level waste disposal regulations, but enforcement varies, and certainly not all regulations are enforceable by penalties. Targets are not the norm when it comes to waste regulations around the world. The focus tends to be on practices, but the EU is making strides in this direction, and we're going to hear a bit more about that later on. Typically, waste management regulations don't relate specifically to the exhibitions industry, but are broader in scope and cover items such as sorting, recycling, and removal in a more general sense. And this can sometimes have implications in terms of a venue's ability to comply. For example, if waste needs to be sorted within the venue, there may not be time or space to do this. The landscape is evolving fast, especially as it relates to plastics. New regulations and laws are emerging all the time, and with a particular focus on single-use plastics or disposable cups, that kind of thing. And in some areas, in some regions, food waste is also rising up the regulatory agenda. And industry associations are responding in different ways in different countries. Some have developed charters which members can sign up to, and there seems to be a move to get ahead of the game. The idea being that if new laws are in place, associations can take the opportunity to feed into public policies as opposed to being reactive to them. And there is a recognition from all the people that we spoke to that regulation should not be the driving force behind change, but it can catalyse action across the sector, and in particular government actions which incentivise companies to address waste management. So a lot of broad findings there. And as I say, we're going to talk a bit more about regulations later on. What are the challenges in waste management? So about 2 years ago, Greenview, supported by UFI, published the Green Venue Report 2018. And this gives a broad overview of different challenges in waste management. And that includes things like staff not sorting the waste properly, limited organisations in order to divert waste to, lack of education, lack of understanding of data and measurement or ability to measure effectively. The sorts of materials which are used in many cases are difficult to recycle or expensive to recycle, and limited space. So there's a broad, a large range of issues in waste management, but in the conversations that we had as part of this project, actually 3 kind of common and very interlinked challenges emerged. The first is around the physical problems around stands and their materials and how you can dispose of them sustainably. The second was around engaging the whole range of stakeholders with sustainability in the planning and execution. So how you can make sure that waste management in particular is embedded in the planning of an event. And then the third area was working with the exhibitors and visitors on site. So this is communicating as an event is going on how waste can be minimised. And And just to look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So the big issues with exhibition stands were the materials used, most commonly wood, which is heavy and bulky, difficult to dispose of, lack of understanding or even basic awareness of sustainability from those commissioning exhibition stands. So even if a company that has a stand might have a great sustainability program itself, does this necessarily filter down to the person who is in charge of commissioning and delivering the stand? There's a lack of awareness of options of sustainable materials amongst the suppliers. Do they know where to go, what they can use, or do they just go with what they've always used? Cost as well is a big issue. And again, the short time frame, turnaround time in between events can make it difficult to appropriately dispose of stands, and often the responsibility for disposal is not clear. Is it the exhibitor? Is it an outsourced construction company? Is it an outsourced removal company? So many different stakeholders involved, which adds to the challenge. And again, then this comes to the engaging the actual stakeholders. And here are just a couple of quotes that came out through the research as to how people feel about this. I think from the convention centres felt that that should not be just up to them. There others should be involved. And I think generally there is this need for a kind of holistic approach when it comes to planning. And then finally, working with exhibitors and visitors, and here was where there was some more kind of concrete actions that could be taken, including lots of initiatives to raise awareness through communications, both to exhibitors and visitors, and this will come up in the best practices a bit later on. Development of certifications to identify sustainable stands, as well as some incentives around that, and looking at how rewards and incentives can be embedded to encourage exhibitors to engage with sustainability and in that sense also waste management. So those were the challenges. The final part of the report looks at some of the best practices, some of the actions that are being taken in order to address the challenges. And these all came from the Sustainable Development Award, which, as we've mentioned, focused on waste management. So I'm just going to go through some of them here very quickly. There's a lot more detail in the report, as well as the compendium of best practices, which I think is due to be released imminently. Christian can probably give more information on that. But there were some really good examples from across the world on how different companies, be they venues or organisers or others, are addressing some of these. So first of all, looking at this issue of embedding waste management through the event planning cycle. And there's lots of different approaches here. A nice idea from IMTMA in India, who have incentivize their exhibitors to proactively embrace eco-design in stands via an award system. In Thailand, the Royal Paragon Hall brings the whole team together at the beginning of a project to discuss sustainability, including waste management, and then they make a plan to embed it in the process. Greenview, USA has bi-weekly sustainability meetings in the year running up to the event, which includes all stakeholders, including show director, building management, catering and vendors, etc. And then Olympia in the UK, in London, up the road from where I am, it offers this comprehensive post-event sustainability report to each exhibition free of charge, which gives a really helpful picture to the organisers of their sustainability performance. And of course, waste management is included within that. And then looking at how various different means of engaging with delegates to reduce waste. ADNEC in UAE, we'll talk about this a bit later, has installed some reverse vending machines throughout the venue, which accept plastic bottles and cans. And this does not only increase awareness of recycling, across employees and vendors, but also it helps them generate cash, which is donated to the Red Crescent. In company, R&C Market Research Company, which runs the European and Asia Event Forum, they only recommend hotels that have proactive sustainability, wastewater and energy management practices, and they use certifications to identify those hotels. In Sweden, it seems to be that recycling bins are in all public areas, and customers are encouraged to sort their waste into 4 different sections, and they have staff around the venue wearing t-shirts and vests saying, "Ask me about recycling." So very proactive and visible approach there. And again, Green Build USA launched their Bring Your Own Bottle initiative, which they pushed out through digital marketing communications well before the event, but also had a sustainability pledge wall on the show floor, which is a really engaging and visible way of getting the visitors to engage with sustainability. And then looking at sort of the technological solutions, there are a couple of great cases that emerged from the awards. The first is this Process Chanel International from France, who basically they recycle paper and stand materials and repurpose them as furniture and other items, which is a great sort of circular use of the materials. And fintech in Singapore, perhaps not surprisingly, went totally digital through electronic marketing, on-site materials, digital mapping for stage design, and encouraging exhibitors to also go digital, thus reducing the paper and waste that they generated. And then the final section is kind of at the end of the process, as it were, disposing of waste. There's a great example from Fiera Roma in Italy, and their composting, which managed to reduce by 80% their organic waste. And this example from PS Bedi in India as well is where they had over 2,000 tons of paper waste was processed and repurposed to produce paper goods in their own factory, which not only generated over $100,000 a year, but also through the factory they're able to employ local people who former drug addicts and others, and thus providing a great sort of social impact as well. Donation programs are obviously, this is quite a common way of disposing of waste, but some of the most notable ones was the ICC in Sydney, where over 8,000 kilos of food was donated to local charities in 2019. And then RAI Amsterdam has a very sort of strategic approach to donations, looking at who they can work with and how they can best donate food and other items in an appropriate way. And then finally, and this is one of my favourite examples, the small things matter, and I think this is really important. But again, ICC Sydney removed complimentary mints and eliminated over 500,000 individual plastic wrappers a year. And I think when you're thinking about waste management and sustainability in general, actually, there are some very small things that can make an impact, and if you start with them, it's a good way, good basis on which to develop more complicated processes. So this leaves us with 6 sort of potential focus areas in terms of going forward. UFI already plays an important role in raising awareness of the importance of waste management in the exhibition sector, and particularly the challenges and solutions the sector faces. And this is supported by providing and sharing best practices, like through the awards and through other mechanisms, so that people can learn from each other and better understand what works well and how it can be applied. But the discussions that fed into this report, as well as the findings from the Green Revenue report and the information of the best practices, case studies, have led to a identification of a number of potential focus areas which can be addressed in the future. And they're set out here, and it includes the circular economy, sort of the avoidance, collection, treatment of waste to reduce waste to zero, this whole area of engaging with stakeholders, exhibitors and visitors to promote the minimization of waste and recycling and the responsible disposal of waste where it is created. Measurement is a massive topic, how you measure different materials, how you measure diversion rates, how you track and monitor, and this is a big, this is almost sort of fundamental to how we can take actions going forward. Solutions to practical issues such as the space and time constraints, where waste is sorted, that kind of thing, and particular actions that can be taken in that area. And then the donation and community programs is another area, and then finally technological solutions such as sustainable materials or digital delivery of an event. So these are the 6 areas which emerged. As I mentioned, or as Christian mentioned, this is an ongoing project, and this report will be updated. Different elements will be taken and discussed as necessary by the Sustainable Development Working Group. And so thank you for listening. That's all for now for the presentation, but I look forward to discussing the issues in more detail with some of you as we continue.
Thank you, Olivia, for this very comprehensive presentation. As you mentioned, and before moving to the panel, I would like to stress that this is indeed the first edition of the report, meaning that we will enrich it with time. That's what we plan. Don't hesitate to contact me at chris@ufi.org for any comments, suggestions. And as you mentioned also, Olivia, this surely applies to the conclusion of this report, which calls towards next steps that the UFI working group will look into. But let's now move to the panel. And maybe Pascal, you can indeed put the next slide. So today's discussion is focused on Asia Pacific and the Middle East, but in order to cover additional legislation and global perspectives, we also invited representatives from EEIA in the EU and Informa. So our panelists are, and I'm going to introduce them very quickly, Nabil Al-Yafeai, Environment, Cleaning and Heavy Duty Manager at ADNEC in the Arab Emirates. ADNEC was finalist of our 2020 award competition. Lucy Ryan, she's Sustainability Manager at Informa, headquarters in the UK, and she was part of our working group for Europe. Barbara Weizsacker, she's the General Secretary of EEIA, which is the association between UFI and EMECA, and she also took part in the work related to the legislation in the EU. And last but not least, our colleague William Wilson, Beverage Operation and Cellar Manager from ICC Sydney in Australia, who won our 2020 award competition. So after this quick introduction, Olivia, please go ahead with the panel.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you, Christian, and welcome to all the panelists. It's great to have you here from all around the world. So William, first of all to you. As Christian mentioned, the ICC Sydney was the winner of the Waste Management Award this year. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So why don't you just tell us briefly about some of the work that you've done in this area, and most importantly, I guess, the impact that it's having on your operations and on your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, our waste management process is part of our Event Legacy program, and that's our community program that was mentioned earlier on, how much impact an event will have on our local community here in Sydney. Sustainable events obviously are a really important part of this. Now, that includes our local sustainable procurement policy and, of course, what we're talking about today, the waste management. We're really proactive about our program, and we include it in client discussions right from the very earliest planning stages. And I think this is a really important aspect to look at. Even within bidding for events, we're actually talking about our event legacy program. We've created a sustainable event guide, which is a huge range of different collateral that we can actually give to the clients, and the clients can copy it across. Big one that we have, of course, is exhibitors. So we actually have all of this information for exhibitors that we can put straight into the client's manuals for them. We work early on with exhibition clients to identify the different types of waste that are going to be generated straight through the different stages of their event. So during the bump in, during the operation, and during the bump out of the events, we're actually going to need different types of bins, different types of skips. We need to make sure that we're not going to run out. If you run out of any of them, you just end out with contaminated lines, and that really is the big thing that we're trying to avoid there. Over the last 18 months, we've really made a lot of improvements. We've only been open for 4 years, so we're really learning, and we're really picking up, making just constant improvements in what we do. Big ones that we've done is we've introduced a couple of new waste streams, and that's really made a big difference. Year on year between 2018 and 2019, we actually reduced the overall waste that we generate by 37%. So we're really proud of that. Introducing the dry waste stream is a big one in exhibitions in particular. So this is a stream where it goes out to a company called Resource Co, who sorted out anything that can be recycled is sent for recycling, and then you tend to be left with hard waste. So you have metals, you have a lot of wood products. MDF is the big one, where we're building stands out of this kind of glued together wood material, particle board. Those kind of things are all left over. Everyone who runs exhibitions understands that when you have custom stands, they're going to generate a lot of waste, a lot of weight at the end of that event that needs to be recycled if you can. What we've been doing is it actually gets made into biofuel, so it avoids landfill. And we actually create biofuel, and there's a suburb out in Western Sydney that's actually being fueled by this resource centre that we're sending our MDF out to, which is a pretty big win. Our food waste is now separated completely. Organic waste is, we've been very successful in keeping that waste uncontaminated. Most of it comes out of the kitchen, obviously, but we also have front of house bins, especially for organic waste, and you know, making sure that they're not contaminated is obviously a big challenge. One big win that we had, and I saw one of the photographs from another centre in the report that had organics bins for composting, and the bin was actually full of what looks like paper, and it's actually bio paper, so it's plant-based paper. But you actually need an awful lot of food waste to be actually able to make that into compost. And we are lucky enough that our compost guy is now taking our compostable coffee cups, and that actually is a huge number of coffee cups, so a big win for us. We saw on the presentation there the charity donation scheme, and again, prepared food that can get sent out to our different food partners, different charities, feeding the homeless, and we have the Matthew Talbot Hostel, and again 23,000 meals, or the equivalent of 23,000 meals going out there is something that we think makes a real difference. Overall, I mean, the big message is to have our executive buy-in, to have team members right across the organisation in roles that can really affect this, and just having the right people who are motivated to reduce waste. And that really means that we can continue to make these great steps that we've been doing.
Thank you, thank you. That was really interesting and very comprehensive as well in what you're doing. I loved it. You finished on the perfect point talking about motivating people, and I guess wanted to move over to Lucille now from Informa. And Informa, you organise hundreds of events a year, and particularly when it comes to the exhibitors, how do you motivate exhibitors to address waste management?
Yeah, and I think for us, our focus has definitely been on how do we eliminate the waste in the first place? How do we design it out from how we deliver our events? And that's kind of reflected in our targets that we just launched earlier this year. We want to have halved our waste by 2025, and we want to have got to zero waste by 2030. And as you said, in order to get there, one of the toughest problems is going to be those disposable stands that you were just talking about, that MDF that's used by the stands that are thrown away at the end of the event. And I think there's probably 3 things we've learned so far that's key in trying to engage those exhibitors on that change. The first one is really, we had to look at our own builds first. We couldn't really start talking to our exhibitors about how they could change their stands until we'd made sure the structures we were responsible for were waste-free. That's our feature areas, our shell schemes, registration, etc. And then we could kind of showcase what was possible, but also set that ethos of what we were expecting and what we were wanting to happen at the event. Secondly, it's massively been data. You know, the more we could build up an understanding for each one of our shows as to which specific exhibitor is using a disposable stand, we could kind of tailor the strategy to that event. And we could also, our sales and operations teams could have a much more impactful conversation with that exhibitor if they knew that they were using a disposable stand than when we were reliant without that data on just having a blanket conversation to everyone that wasn't specific. And then the last bit, I think, and it's true for whenever we're trying to engage our exhibitors with anything, with any change in regards to sustainability, is that the big change won't happen until we've found the solution that not only solves the problem, in this case waste, but we've also found the solution that is better for the exhibitor. You know, it's a better exhibitor experience. And what we're just launching across Informa markets EMEA, and we're hoping to roll out further, is a program called Better Stands. And we're wanting to really engage our exhibitors who are currently using a disposable stand with why they're missing out on benefits they don't know about. You know, if they move away, you know, better quality, better, you know, better value, better safety, better time efficiencies. And then on top of that, there's better sustainability. But we won't get that exhibitor movement if we're not engaging them with why they should, you know, rather than just telling them what the issue is.
Yeah, it goes back to the business case, doesn't it? And the rationale for doing it. Thank you. So I wanted to move on to Nabil now in Abu Dhabi, and sort of talk a little bit more around how you engage with your staff and your employees on this, because when it comes to making sure waste is sorted and disposed of sustainably, that staff are key. I think you need to unmute yourself, or just. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Yes, so what we did is when we have sustainability, it became part of our strategy. We have to come up with a way to engage the staff. So what we did is we have to come up with something. So what we created, what we call a green team, way back at the beginning. A green team is a member of 15 staff from different departments. They're actually volunteers, people who are passionate regarding sustainability and recycling. We meet once a month. So what we do is we share ideas, initiatives, and we break the team into small groups 2s and 3s and 4s, and we take different initiatives, and we come up with this initiative. And if we see if it's doable, it's visible, then we take the approach, take it to higher management. And then we get the green light, we go ahead with the initiative. I can mention few of them. For example, you mentioned earlier, reverse vending machine. This was part of the green team initiative. The revenue from the recycling from plastic and cans, end of the year, we donate that to Red Crescent, as you said. Also, one of the other ideas that came from this team is LFC, liquid food composting. We actually have a zero food waste on site. We segregate the food in the kitchen, waste food, and we put in this machine, LFC, and they turn this into a gray water. So this is one of them. Another of our initiatives, which is we're really very proud of it, is the used oil from the kitchen. We use the oil kitchen, used oil. We have a small, like we can say a refinery. We turn it into a biodiesel, and now we have 2 of those. And we turn the biodiesel on site and use it in our cherry picker, forklifts, our chillers in the kitchen. So we try as much as possible, reduce, reuse, recycle on site as possible as we can. Because we have done all of these, to engage more, to make staff more proud, we created what we call a Green Week, for example, which we invite speakers from different entities. Last year we did with UAE Space Agency. We brought a company which they do indoor upright farming. You know, in the desert, we're trying to come up with something very sustainable. So when the staff see their ideas, the members, it comes true, they get more engaged. And also remember, they are ambassadors to the rest of the company in their departments. So this is how we spread the word. For doing that, we end up winning a huge amount of, I can say, awards around the globe. For example, last year, 2019, EUFQM cycle economy, we came #1. And this was really a pride for ADNEC in this region, actually. Another thing is recently, last month, we won another award in sustainability initiatives in Abu Dhabi itself, which is by Abu Dhabi Environmental Agency. So we are engaging and we're winning, and all these awards became very successful, and we share it through our intercom with the rest of the staff. This is how we engage and the buying in for all the staff and the visitors, actually, we can say.
Wow, that sounds inspirational, actually. Sitting here, that's fantastic. And I guess, so thank you for sharing all of that. I just wanted to come back to William quickly. And so there's all these great things going on within different companies, organizations, and everyone's very proud of it. How do you share that with the visitors, the delegates? How do you engage them in what you're doing? Because waste management's not massively sexy, is it?
It certainly isn't, and the public is definitely the loose trigger out there that we have probably the least amount of control over. We are really lucky to have a lovely new building. We've got some great technology around the building. We have fantastic digital signage screens pretty much everywhere, and we actually use them to promote different environmental messages in different areas. For instance, the ones that are in our catering outlets and the exhibition halls, they're promoting the use of keep cups, and they're really making clear the 4 different waste streams that we use. So you have the communication there. It got mentioned earlier on as well, bins themselves are probably the most important aspects of it. We've just introduced some new, really well-designed bin stations for public areas. We have 4 streams, and 4 streams to get the public to actually buy into separating their own waste. You know, that's really difficult, but if you have a bin station that makes it really obvious and there's other people looking at you, the majority of the people would certainly seem to be buying into it. So you have the different coloured lids of the bins, you get clear symbols, and we've actually done, I've had a lovely job numerous times to actually do some bin audits and actually see how badly contaminated they've been. And, you know, having the 4 bins together seems to be working really well. We used to have great big bins, and you would put a bin on either side of a pillar, for instance. And of course, the public just use whatever bin they see first and they just put it in there. It doesn't matter what sign, what colour lid it is. But if you have the 4 of them together, it seems to be making a real big difference. And, you know, it's really important. Get into the planning earlier on as well as that, because you have to actually put them in the right spots on your floor plan. So again, it's down to planning. The last one we do, and again, another one of the centres was doing it, we use the human signage. So if you have a big event with a big lunch break, perhaps lunch boxes and a lot of rubbish at the end of it, we actually have people manning the bin stations, just making sure everyone gets it right. So, you know, we'll try our best, but that's certainly one of the most difficult areas.
Yeah. I love the idea of human signage. So we've talked a lot about kind of what goes on site and how you engage with different stakeholders. And I guess sort of sitting behind all of this is then what is going on at the regulatory level. And I mentioned before that, you know, that it's patchy around the world, but the EU is kind of leading the way in this regard. So Barbara, I just wanted to come to you and sort of let's go into that in a bit more detail. And tell us what's going on with regards to waste management in the EU. How's this going to impact the industry in the future? And what can the industry do to sort of better represent itself to governments so that workable solutions are found?
Thank you, Olivia. Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara, representing all the European exhibition industry players to the European Union. As you know, life in Europe is a little bit more complex with member states, single legislation, and then the big roof by the EU. And well, you may have heard that the EU has the intention to become carbon neutral by 2050. So this is the overarching aim, and all the, let's say, policies and legislation will go in this direction in the future. Already, I have to say, when listening to the different examples that we've heard from across the world in the EU already on the legislation and also on the practice, we are relatively advanced. For example, sorting the waste, etc. All this is obligatory since a very long time, and it has been a learned exercise by most of the attendees of the shows. What is more complex is the waste that's generated by the stands and exhibitors in general, and the bigger items and packaging, for example. So what is important and what is going on in the EU at the moment is there is a complex panorama. We have one legislative package. It's called the Circular Economy Package, that affects several directives. These are the pieces of legislation from the EU that have to be then transposed into national legislation by all the member states. And there are always small margins of adding or giving a national spin to these things, but creating a level playing field. And then this is flanked by 2 flagship policies. One is the European Industrial Strategy, and one is the Green Deal. You might have heard about the 2. And all this is closely interrelated. So the wage legislation itself is also multi-layer. It sets out new targets. It adds new definitions. it changes cease to be waste definitions, for example. So things that were considered waste earlier are no longer waste. They are raw materials and we want to use them. So the whole mindset of looking at material has changed or is being in the process of changing. And this affects very much the legislation. So in this circular economy package, we have 4 important directives. One is on waste, one is on packaging waste. Then we have one on the landfill of waste and one of end-of-life vehicles, batteries, etc. So the most important for our industry are the normal waste and the packaging waste. As we have a lot of products coming and going, everything is being shipped. There is a lot of packaging too, in addition to the normal waste. So I will just very briefly explain what is the waste package introducing. So there is extended producer responsibility in the future. It can also include organizational responsibility. And then there is the responsibility to contribute to waste prevention, to the reusability and to the recyclability of products. So as I said, the change of mind to think of product first and not, I mean, waste already says it is a waste of material. So we don't want to waste material anymore. And so we want to prevent waste or design products in a way that they can be separated into the raw materials and reused again. This is why, for example, the MDF and everything that is glued together is so complex. So I mean, the mindset should be changing. There is a lot of, let's say, detailed instruction on all this, on also new targets, on municipal waste recycling targets and landfill, etc. And also on record keeping. This is important also for our industry. You need to be able to prove what you've done afterwards. You cannot just, you know, throw things away, etc. You need to really track everything so that it can be controlled. So the weight and the volume, and then also the question of how much are you allowed to give to landfill, etc. All this, there are targets, it's complex. You find all this in the slides, but this is one thing. And then we have the other one on packaging and on packaging waste. That's again, trying to change the mindset of the ones who produce the packaging and use the packaging. So there are programs, and also on national level, there should be programs to incentivize the producer responsibility and to prevent the generation of packaging waste and to minimize environmental impact of the packaging. So, for example, there will be limits to weight and volume to minimum that is adequate. Then there should also be a minimization of dangerous substances in all kinds of packages. And then, of course, from the very beginning, the design to have reusable and recoverable packaging. It should always be only the minimum volume or just to protect the items. There are specific targets by weight, by 2025, by 30, and they are all separate into plastic, into wood, into ferrous metals, aluminium, glass, paper, cardboard, all this already collected separately, but then there will also be textile to be collected separately, etc. So this, as well as the other directive, should have been already transposed into national legislation. It's not the case in all countries, but some countries have already made the first step. And next steps will of course be the implementation, the adaptation of all the companies. And then there will become more steps also from the EU that will establish higher liability and responsibility from the producers, and also tackle the costs, because will the costs of the waste management be borne by the producer, or by the one who uses it, or by the one who has to later, like us, then collect all the rubbish and take it away? So all this will also be tackled. Who will take the cost? Will the cost be shared, etc.? So that's the next step. But for the moment, I mean, we're in the transition phase. There is a lot of movement. And I think in order for our industry position ourselves, of course, I mean, our interest cannot be to have a lot of waste and then somehow have to deal with it. We should embrace all these ideas from the very beginning, take advantage of these detailed, let's say, instructions, implement them from the very beginning, encourage our customers to use them. It also, I mean, we can be a role model by that, you know, because we bring all these people to one place. Already they're flying. I know Christian is always calculating that it's less less carbon emissions than having individual travel, but already people are focusing on the big events because they are a generator of waste. So if we can turn it around and say we are at the forefront, we adapt the best practices, not only do we fulfill the legislation, of course we have to anyways, but we go further, and we promote it because we have a lot of influence. We have people from all over the world on our shows in Europe. This can be a trigger for the whole sector, and I think it is now the time, I mean, to embrace this. And perhaps if people from other parts in the world read this legislation, perhaps you can already now just implement a few of the items and go further ahead and be quicker than the legislation in your countries. I think it is for the good of our industry, and it's practical too.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I think you've done a great job of making EU legislation sound relatively simple to understand, if not to deliver. But thank you. And if you look at the full report, there's a whole appendix which sets out what Barbara's just been talking about. So take a look at that, because, you know, best practice is not just about what you do on site, but it's regulation, how you approach it, and how you can talk to your own governments as well about what they can be doing. So I'd like to thank all the panelists. I think we've got a few minutes for questions from the audience. I'm going to hand back to Christian, who will share all the questions that you've been asking while we've been talking. But thank you to all my panelists.
Okay, yes, thank you very much, Olivia, and all the panelists for this interesting session. We haven't received, in fact, many questions so far, but I've got one maybe on my side for Nabil. And it's related to COVID. Has COVID made you rethink sustainability? Are there any new things you're planning now, or things you can't do? You need to unmute, Nabil, please. You need to unmute, Nabil. We can't hear you. Yeah.
No? Okay. All right. Okay. Actually, no. Still, I'm passionate. My passion started 12 years ago and still ongoing. So we know there is a challenge. We work so much to recycle, reduce disposable, all these things. Unfortunately, what happened where we are now, the challenge became we have to use disposable because it's not safe, it causes infection and all these things. So what we are trying to do is I looked into another thing to do. For example, incinerator, small incinerator in-house to incinerate all the disposable and the items that we can't do, because then we have less things to send to reduce to the landfill. This is one of the options we looked into. And I'm sure there is other options. Another thing is, I think this will benefit organizer going forward to maybe use less contactless surfaces, papers, using digital screen, using apps, using other things to take it forward. And this is an end run. It will reduce the cost for the organizer and for the venue. I think this is my answer to that.
Thank you, Nabil. Interesting. And you questioned the role of organizers there. Lucy, can I ask you the same question as an organizer?
Yeah, as to how COVID's changed sustainability. I think on the very short term, like Nabil just talked about, when we were developing All Secure, we had to be conscious of what's needed now and how are we going to still deliver that in a sustainable way. So thinking about, like you said, about if we're needing more disposable items, how do we still deliver that in a sustainable way, whether that's having recycling facilities needed right next to it, or still what options of materials can we consider in regards to that, so that people will still know, people will know why we've had to make that change that might feel like a backward step, but still do that change in a sustainable way as much as we can. But I think bigger picture wise, what it's actually allowing us to do is take a moment to see what projects that we had been wanting to deliver that we can do now, because you know, there's been this space for us to be able to consider and what can we come back, you know, more sustainable than we were. And better stands is an example of that, of we're actually going faster on hopefully getting to there being no disposable stands used at our shows, because there's a chance for us to put more in place now that we've had this pause. You know, and again on reducing the numbers of maybe kind of you know, touch points of things being handed out. You know, it's a chance for us to reassess our digital you know, provisions and get more things in place. So this is actually a chance for us to leapfrog to maybe where we knew we were trying to get to, but we can do it a bit faster because of this opportunity in some ways.
Thank you, Lucy. That's very interesting and certainly inspiring. I think maybe a good word to conclude now. We've almost reached the hour. So I would like to thank all our speakers and participants, and I hope you found the session useful. I will look again at the chat to see if we missed any question, but don't hesitate to contact me for any questions. Pascal, if you can move to the next slide, I will show our next event. So obviously there's another one, but around waste management, but this time focused on Americas and Europe with a different timing. As you can see, we'll have some similar speakers, but we'll be adding Impact Zero from Mexico, Olympia London in the UK, and Greenview in the USA. So this will be on the 8th of October. But before that, we have additional sessions, Pascal. So on Monday, we have Dubai again upfront with the issue of reopening business and tourism. And on the Tuesday, we have a topic which might be of interest for you around diversity. So thank you again. Let's move to the final slide, which is of the one just before the final one. Again, if you have any additional or unanswered questions, don't hesitate to send them to us at media@ufi.org. You will be receiving a survey, and please provide your feedback. It's useful for our next sessions as well. And obviously you can use any of the social media channels to keep the conversation going. Last but not least, we of course would like to thank our diamond sponsors, Thailand Redefine Your Business Events at TISEP, Qatar National Tourism Council, Shenzhen World Exhibition and Convention Center, and Freeman. Thank you again, everybody, for this session. You will be receiving the recording in a day or two, and hope to see you soon, quickly. Bye.
Thank you.